Good evening. I'd like to call to order a special meeting of the City Council of Satellite Beach, March 5th, 2013, approximately 6 p.m. This is a public hearing, ordinance number 1066. So we'll read at this time. Ordinance number 1066, an ordinance of the City of Satellite Beach, Brevard County, Florida, amending the comprehensive plan based on the city's updated data analysis, which include amendments to the text of the future land use, transportation, housing, infrastructure, coastal management / conservation, recreation or governmental coordination, capital improvements, community appearance, and public school facility elements of the 1998 Comprehensive Plan as amended, to revise and update the existing goals, objectives, and policies in accordance with the mandate set forth in Chapter 163 Florida statute, authorizing transmittal of this agreement to the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council, State Land Planning Agency, and other applicable agencies for review and commitment as required by Florida statute, providing a conflicts clause and severability clause, and providing an effective date. And this is the first reading of ordinance number 1066.
Thank you, Mayor. The reason is just to let everybody know the formality, and I'm sure everybody knows this, but for the public, the reason you're doing this as a public hearing, first reading, as a transmittal public hearing, is that it saves you money and time, because if you go through, as we said, this would be a public hearing, a public meeting where you would make decisions on the comp plan amendments. You have to have it as it's officially a transmittal. It doesn't mean you have to transmit tonight. You would defer, in my mind, after we get through tonight, we would defer things to the 20th meeting, which will allow us to give you the full book with whatever we agree upon tonight. But we didn't do it in this formal manner, even though this is a special time that you're meeting. It has to be a public transmittal public hearing, so that you don't have to spend the cost of advertising this again if you did it on the 20th. So I didn't want to frighten anybody by all the official part, but that's what this is in terms of the comp plan amendment process. Now, you had asked me to do a couple of things. We're going to walk through the different narratives of our plan of revisions, and I did give you a backup that shows you there are different alternates. But the one thing I'd like to do, if you don't mind, if you turn to page 2, where last time, you remember, we talked about the ability of making some map changes. Do you remember that? And I think on the very first one, on page 1 to 10, it talks about, after we had talked about the shalls and the musts, or the shalls and the wills, right? We talked about why our future land use map couldn't be done a little bit differently. This is your, if you look up, this is your future land use map on the PowerPoint. It shows your existing map has got a lot of subcategories and a lot of initials in black and white. When I've given you the council, because sometimes colors get distorted, your yellows for your single family are coming out a little bit orange and whatever, but you can still see the contrast on the PowerPoint that almost all jurisdictions have gone to the color for the future land use map. Goes on your website, etc., and it illustrates a little bit better the clusters, if you will, of land use swath a little bit better than when you do the letters in the black and white. And we also collapsed some of the categories so that you didn't necessarily have to have all the sites identified. You remember the last time we talked, and it was almost a little bit too busy. So this would be, and again, just so you know, I don't want anybody picking at this map. There's proofing to be done to make sure this is representation of your future land use map. I didn't think you wanted me to do the hours of cost of making sure it was perfect until you agreed that that's a better way to go than the black and white. So that would be my offer to you, that that's probably a better way to go on the future land use map in the representation. Any questions?
I think it's a much better way to do it, but I'm still a little confused why we have land use designation as like church and synagogue.
But you have to at some point decide, and I don't know that it's necessary to do it now, but at some point that you don't want that, and it would go into the category itself, that would be the public category. But I don't know that we need to have that battle now. You just go ahead and show that it is a future land use category, and that's what you have. And at this point, we've taken rid of the subcategories, and at some point that you agree that you want to collapse the categories, we can do that.
Okay, and then just one other question, because in the old map, it talks about the town center mixed use district. I don't really understand where that is, because it says it's between A1A, it's right on the land use map that's in our draft, A1A and South Patrick Drive, north of Park. So we don't have a designated land use for mixed use?
We do.
Or town center, rather? Town center mixed use.
I would end up showing that wherever it is.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, to me, this is a matter of it ain't broke, don't fix it. Once you go to all colors, you can never make a black and white copy of a map.
Well, on your future land use, you're going to have a tough time to actually deal with something in black and white, because you've got all the different aspects to it. Almost all that we deal, every jurisdiction we deal with on the future land use map shows it is the color, because you can see the clusters better, the contrast is better than you can in the black and white. And when you do it on the web page, you want to show it that way as well. If somebody wants to keep, for informational purposes, something in black and white, they can, but your document on your future land use ought to be in the color code of that type. We've almost gone that way. And the other problem is you're going to end up on a printer, if somebody wants to print something in black and white, to really see it when in the black and white, you almost have to go to the bigger version, and then you're going to go to a bigger printer that would have the availability of the color. So that's why I think you probably need to have it in the book, and also on the website is color. It's just too busy to see in the black and white.
Dominic?
No, I just was pulling it down.
I think it's easy to read, to be honest.
And for informational purpose, you can keep, I mean, it's awful hard to keep them both up, but I mean, you could keep up the other one if somebody wanted to be black and white, but it's really hard to see that.
I love it. I think it's going to be a great tool when it's put online and people can scan around and zoom in to what they need and print the sections they need when they're looking at the future land use.
Mayor, okay with that one, or do we want to?
Yeah, we're fine. Yeah, I like the colored one, to be honest.
The next one that we'll go back.
Wait a minute.
Shall we go back?
I don't think it's necessary, but, you know, if we want to record 4-1, that's fine.
Okay.
I don't have a problem with it being in color. I think, especially to be able to look at it on the on the website. I think we're living in a color world now.
Really?
I don't have a problem with it.
Vote on turning the land use map into color.
I'll make a motion that we change it to the colored map.
Motion by Councilman Dean, do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Second by Vice Mayor Bryant. Any further discussion? Poll the council.
No.
Yes.
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 Ask me on the next one to make sure that we actually have some explanations of the flood zones and et cetera. We now made that explanation for you. I didn't do you a map, but it does explain the different areas so you can see what it is, what's meant by the velocity zone, et cetera.
Where are you?
I'm on the second one on the map that we talked about. There were 3 map areas.
The FEMA map.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I pulled the maps out separately. Page 9, was it? 1 dash, thank you. And we had some difficulties in the fact that we didn't have the nomenclature. And that's basically what this does.
Hang on.
It's our draft 114, figure 13,
It's
that we
not
had
on this
previously.
sheet here, it's on the,
The draft that we were
Draft that we
provided
had.
a couple weeks ago.
Right.
It's where?
it's on the draft that we had a couple of weeks ago, the draft.
Right.
This is 1-9. Did you mention it in this, I have that. Did you mention it in your report, Mr. Lewis?
Yes, I did.
Where is that?
Page 6. On page 6 at the top.
Top of page 6.
6, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Top of page 6.
Okay.
I should have gone back and referred to those. So you referred to the FEMA zone legend and requested this legend be spelled out. I'm just trying to illustrate that that's what we did. So it's spelled out to show what each of the zones, you remember what they mean. I think that was our question, so there would be.
We don't have that.
I thought it would be easier to show it to you on the PowerPoint, but that's what that would be spelled out on the different areas.
On page 114.
It's different from what's in there.
Yes, he spelled this out.
What you had before is this.
Right.
On 114, we're now going to this, which explains what those abbreviations, that's all that we did.
Okay.
Well, I do have a question. The red that goes across the island and then out into Merritt Island, how did we come up going so far west? And why are we including that if it's not in our city?
Well, that's part of the, I didn't change the FEMA zones, that's how they've come up with it.
That's FEMA zone.
That's a FEMA zone,
This?
Yeah.
That's our city boundary.
I don't know. Oh, okay.
Is this red line here?
Oh, I'm sorry, I see what you're saying. That's how it's been in all your maps, you're rating something that,
I think we need to change it to
well,
show our, just to be our city.
as far as I know, it's not inaccurate. It's not inaccurate the way it's showing it, I think, so I'll tell you what, we'll verify that, that's another issue. Now, are we okay with the coding? I mean, in other words, what we
Yes.
have? Then the level of service.
Mr. Mayor, can we get consensus or
On
whatever
every one.
on each
Oh,
item so
everyone.
that we don't have to come back?
Good point, thank you.
I'll make a motion to.
If we can get consensus, we can do it that way.
Great.
Yeah, but I would like that boundary looked at. It's way out of Merritt Island.
Okay, you said, with the
Okay.
boundary being looked at? Fine. Okay, consensus.
And we're checking the city limits, is that what we have?
Well, that boundary is not in the city of Satellite Beach where that line is.
That western left.
Line is not. That
Okay.
western line goes, I believe, to the center of the intercoastal, or the waterway there, is how it,
Okay,
So it's just way, just too far.
and I have no idea why it's different. Okay.
Yeah, because it doesn't show it on this map, it's going out that far. But it doesn't.
Do we have consensus?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, and then the next was the roadway LOS. Let's see. That we wanted to know the difference between the A, B, C, that was on page 6, I think, the legend's letters and colors with regards to what they represent. Remember on 2-6, wanted the legend to make it easier for the citizens to interpret and make the difference. So you actually have here the difference between the different levels, which out of the DOT manual. And it's spelled out what the difference with each of the categories are.
It's 2.6, correct?
Yeah, 2.6, that's right.
Consensus?
Well, I can't see that, but I do believe that this is where there's a conflict with the CRA draft plan, that the map where they have the levels of service don't match up with this map. So some coordination needs to be done to find out which one is correct.
Well, yes, you end up needing to amend right now what governs is the comp plan. So you need to make sure that there is an inconsistency that they coordinate. That's right. Because right now, always your comp plan will govern in terms of level of service.
Consensus? Consensus?
You good?
Yes, sure. Good.
Okay. Now, the next one was the future bicycle paths. You wanted that to where you could see it better in red. Remember that? We have done that.
All right.
2-9.
Should be 9, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's harder for you to see on the PowerPoint. I thought this would be a little bit better, but it does show up when you see it on the actual map itself, the red for the path. And I think that's important for you. I think you wanted to see that in the red. Any questions on that?
It's really red?
It really is. I do have a hard copy. I should have gone ahead and given you all those out so you could see that. Your PowerPoint had one color, my PowerPoint has another, so it's not coming out very, very clear, but that is, trust me, that is red. Any questions on it?
Consensus? Looks good.
I'm okay.
Good.
Now, I thought it would be easier to do the pictures, but obviously with the colors, it's not. So we're done with the pictures. Are we ready to move in with the language now? I'll do better, I think.
So on that right here, sir, if I got right, on the comp plan, there's a conflict, you think, 2.6 with the CRA plan. So we need to take a look at that. Okay.
And then let's be specific. What we're thinking is there is a level of service that they were showing that was different than the comp plan. They can't show a level of service different. If they want to amend it, then they can do that. Is that what you think is happening?
I'll have to go back and look. I just know it didn't match up.
Right. But I'm saying to you, if it's necessary to re-look at that, then they can do that. But right now, what governs is your level of service is what is the comp plan.
But if the information's coming from the DOT and that information changes over time, isn't it what comes from the DOT?
Well, we'll find out. It is. And what we'll find out is in the review, in fact, that's one thing that we will do. It may be that there'll be an update that'll be different.
That's what I think it is.
And if that's out there, then that'll be taken care of in our review.
Okay. Well, I'm just noting that there's a conflict between the two, and maybe
And it may not be a conflict. It may just be in the DOT review because that's part of what we do. Yeah.
We'll find it here.
Okay. I guess we're probably ready to start with page 1 now that we've gone through the tough but easy part on the pictures. We had a discussion about the impervious area, remember, and you asked me to come back with, right now, our proposed revision on policy 1.14.4, I'm on page 1, reads that the maximum impervious surface for development in the category will not exceed 70% of the site. Remember, and that the rationale for that was that matches up to what your land development code is. And you wanted to see possibly alternates that other jurisdictions might have in treating the impervious, and we gave you a couple of alternates. One is another jurisdiction was a little less strict than your 70%, that's 85%, that's alternate 1. And an interesting one that you could consider, alternate 2, instead of giving a percentage of impervious area, says, and I got this from a real jurisdiction, said that it could be determined within the specific zoning district regulations. And what that means, of course, is comp plan officials, you don't get to see it now because we may vary the impervious percentage based on where we have our particular district. For example, if you have an extreme, downtown area, I'll give you an example where I live, downtown Fort Myers is an example where there's old buildings, so there's a lot of paving, et cetera, but it's a true downtown district, where all the buildings are close to the deal. Well, they have an impervious area of 100%, just because of the way they are, but the rest of their town is different. Each zoning district has a different impervious area. If you want to be flexible, you can do that, or you can stick with your main one, which is 70%, because I'm not sure you have such a downtown area that's like that you would have that much of an impervious area, but it's up to you from a policy standpoint. My recommendation was your 70%. People I've worked with people before, they can work things out with different pavers and things to give you some impervious area. But if you get caught in an existing situation where everything is all built out and you don't have a choice, then that's when you can not con them, but you can put them in the deal that you're going to determine it with the zoning district and get out of having a percentage that would be different from each one. So I was trying to give you some choices. Maybe I gave you too many, I don't know.
Council wishes? Questions?
Well, in the CRA, we know that the impervious surface has really been an issue right now, and I looked at all the every zoning district in the land development regulations. In the residentials, we have 50%, all the way through R4 and 5, where you can add 10% in pavers. So you get 50% plus 10% in pavers. RM1, 50%. RM2, RM3, RMAC, LIU, and ITO are all 70%. So I don't really have a problem with alternate 2 as long as we adjust the land development regulations accordingly and allow some flexibility in the redevelopment area for, sharing of retention and things like that. It's going to be necessary if you want to see redevelopment.
Please,
I think the 85% is too much.
Yeah.
And what bothers me about alternate 2 is that all that requires is an ordinance change. And so every time the council turns over, you can get a different standard being put in. And to me, that's a recipe for really messing up the look of the city. And I think that something like this belongs in the comp plan rather than in ordinances. And so I would stay with the 70%.
Further comment?
I think the 85 is too much also. I'm looking at alternate 2, and I'm looking at what happened last year with an issue that's come up, and it's going to come up again tomorrow night, giving away property. And I'd rather, if we're going to put something in the comp plan, it'd be in the comp plan, and it'd be something that's not going to be as easy to change as giving away property was. So I'm comfortable with where it's at.
I just want to say that it's already at 70% in our commercial, so we haven't seen redevelopment, and this is one of the thresholds that we haven't been able to meet to see redevelopment. So, but if it's this board, that's fine with me.
So what you're saying is the 70% is restricting people that have come forward at this point to develop in our city.
In the CRA, not talking about Pelican Coast where it's a different situation, but I think you need to allow some flexibility in the, downtown, we don't really have a downtown, but the redevelopment area for situations like this where it was already built out. Now the hurricanes of 2004 came, we have these areas that need to be developed, and they can't meet these requirements and do anything feasible on these smaller lots. So
how many of those do we have? Do you?
I don't know how many there are. And also, if that's the case, then you also are going to have another conflict with the draft CRA plan because they're encouraging the sharing of retention. It's not that you're not going to have the retention, you're just not going to have 30% on one lot. You may share it with others or do deeper, like you share ABC's retention. So I would just like to see some flexibility in there because, you know, to do a comp plan when comp plan amendment, if a developer comes in here and wants to change that, it's really not feasible.
I'm fine with 70%.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to think outside the box when those things come, because if you look at the meeting that we had where the gentleman came up and approached the council on that piece of property that was behind the Pizza Hut building, the old Pizza Hut building, there's a prime example of what you were talking about as far as a shared area. You know, rather than give that area up, which when we were sitting here talking about it that night, I'm thinking, well, this is a great idea. You know, he's coming in. Why don't we look at, you know, vacating that property? But the more I thought about it, that's a perfect example of being able to utilize that property for shared stormwater for other properties in the area.
But how do you share it if you've restricted a lot to 70%? You're saying you still have to meet the 30 regardless. It's in your comp plan.
We can still be creative in how we handle it.
But it's in your comp plan, so you don't allow the creativity when you're strong, you know, using it as a you know, a stronghold in your comp plan.
Most of the properties around there have probably more than 70% impervious surface. If you look at where Al's Beachside Diner is.
I completely understand, but from
all of that stuff is probably 99 to 100%.
But what I'm hearing is when people come in to redevelop, we're saying you need to meet the thresholds in the code. You have to meet the 70%, and people can't do it. So that's why we are where we are today, and that's fine if you want to leave it at 70%. It's been at 70%. That's what we've had, and I'm not saying just increase it everywhere like it says, but in the CRA, you need to look at allowing some flexibility and take it out of the comp plan and put it in the land development regulations so that people can come in and be flexible and do some of these presentations where we want to share stormwater retention and things like that.
Full council for 70%, is that the wishes? I have a motion.
I'll move that we keep it at 70%.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Councilwoman Gott, a second by Vice Mayor Breimer. Any further discussion? Can I ask one question? John, how much has this affected so far? Have you run into this?
Not really. We certainly run into challenges with the 70%, not to the point where they're deal breakers, but probably the biggest benefit has been the 10% paver credit that's given. What it does is that when people start getting really tight on the 70%, they start looking at using less asphalt, more impervious materials. So in essence, it kind of motivates them to go a different direction and do the pavers versus the blacktop and this kind of stuff.
So they're getting the retention they want, but with another method, with pavers and so forth. So they're increasing that 70 with pavers and other.
Retention in impervious area are a little bit different. You know, retention is usually something that's mandated by St. John's to have a certain percentage of your stormwater runoff retained on site for a period of time. Again, that's a lot different than what we require as far as that pervious area on any given lot being a maximum 70%.
And remember, when you actually had it in your comp plan, it was 60%. So you've gone to 70% to match up to your LDR. So you're giving more flexibility than you had in your comp plan. But John's point is one to remember, and that is that at times when you have somebody have some percentage of impervious area, then they start getting a little more innovative about how they do certain things. You know, the pavers that allow things to soak in then gets to be counted at a certain point. So you get people a little bit more than if you just quite blank gave it. So I don't think you've lost a lot yet.
Okay.
The only zoning districts that are going to benefit from this change to 70 are the residential, the R1, R2, R3, R4, and R5, and RM1, who right now are at 50%. So
they're not going to necessarily change. You can always be
no,
more restricted in your.
I understand that, and only in the two residential can you get the additional 10% for the pavers. The higher higher density residential and commercial were all at 70% in the plan, or in the LDRs, and they have been for I don't know how long, so.
They can use pavers and so forth too, to increase that, correct?
Oh, it's open space, you're talking about impervious surface,
The
yeah.
pavers are allowed in the commercial district. And we've actually, MPM City is probably, or MPM up there on South Bank, probably a great example of where impervious was an issue there. And ultimately, what they came up with was using a lot more pavers for their parking, and they met their impervious. You know, that went to a full site plan, they hit their 70%. Another one was we went through site plan for the, there on Jackson and A1A, you know, the old Seaside Auto, I forget the name of it. When Mr. Olet had that one there, he had a full plan drawn out where there was adequate parking. As you know, right now, it's just pretty darn close to 100% impervious. Well, he was able to bring that down to 70% by removing some asphalt, still maintaining his required parking, and doing a substantial amount of pavers.
Thank you. Any further discussion from council? No.
No.
Councilman Montanaro?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Breimer?
Yes.
Councilman Dodd?
Yes.
Mayor Patino?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Okay. Page 1.10, we already dealt with the map issue, future land use map. Next one on page 2 is the town center mixed use. That's where we actually had on policy 1.1.4, the proposed language talked about the residential space within enclosed buildings should not exceed the commercial space. Basically, the residential can't exceed more than 50%. The alternate to that, of course, would be to take that part out. Your policy would end with the town center mixed use, if you remember, was an approval for a certain number of units when you ended up having that approval. So it would stop after permanently secondary to primary commercial use. You wouldn't have the other limitation. That's the alternate.
I actually like the alternate.
It does give you a little more flexibility. And again, these aren't, in LaRue's language, these aren't guarantees, because we are going to be reviewed by the DEO, and if there's any issues about it, then that would go that way.
Thank you.
However you want to do it, it's a policy decision.
Council?
Well, the CPAD made these recommendations to us, and I have observed them at work, and they discuss things pretty thoroughly. I don't see a problem with leaving it as they recommended, with the additional residential space within an enclosed building should not exceed the commercial space within a building on the same parcel. I would strike the IE part because it's just redundant.
Right. And again, that's probably better that we do it on that, because that is talking about a specific town center mixed use. So it's, yeah. Okay. It's up to you.
Well, I remember years ago when we talked about this, and I'm fine with, striking the IE residential since it's redundant, but I remember when this was discussed, and again, I'm fine with the way it is. And
Way it's being proposed.
yeah.
I'm fine with it also. I know that we did talk, now this is specifically for the town center
It
mixed
is.
use.
It is.
And I'm fine with it in that area, but we also talked about for other properties, maybe doing something different and
Yeah.
allowing more. But for this, I'm fine with that, and I'm also fine with eliminating the IE.
I'll move that we approve the policy 1.14 as proposed by the board, striking the parenthetical IE provision.
Second. Motion by Councilman Gott, second by Vice Mayor Breimer. Further discussion?
Yeah, I just think, same old, same old. We're going to have to allow a little bit of flexibility and a little bit of change if we want to see this community redevelop, and I'm not going to support that. I would really like to see the alternate.
I lean towards the alternate myself also. for where I believe it would be used. Any further? No?
Councilman Dean?
No.
Councilman Montanaro?
Yes.
Councilman Breimer?
Yes.
Councilman Dodd?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
No.
So it's the first version without the IE, correct?
Yes.
Okay. The next one, I don't think it's an alternate here, it's just the May stays in the document, 1.23. I just want to make sure everybody's in agreement that May created an incentive plan to encourage property owners to reduce or eliminate conditions applied to the child development plan. I think that was a consensus to do that, so that's why I had it that way. Is that everybody's opinion?
Yes.
Okay. So that'll go on,
Well,
or
wait.
not?
Why would the city not create an incentive plan?
Well, I have a planning hat and administrative hat, and I put on the administrative hat once in a while when I want to give you some choices, because if you say shall, then you're going to have to. And I think you may or may not want to have the time and effort and money spent to do this.
Okay.
And so you want to give yourself a choice so that somebody later doesn't come and say, you're not being consistent with your comp plan, why not?
Okay. But we shall do it if there's blight.
That's
blight
right.
there. Okay.
That's right.
All right.
So that, I think that's, aren't you glad I have an administrative hat?
Well, yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right, next one. We had a question about whether
Are
others.
we good with that?
We're fine. I think.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That was worded.
I don't think you
Yes.
need to vote on that.
Yeah.
Consensus?
Consensus, everybody? Okay. Next one, still on page 3, 1.2.4. That's the one where we had placed in other similar businesses, and the alternate was taking that out, and it's just a question of whether you want to be flexible, because you can't always tell what businesses they are. That's the one where you prohibited certain kinds of things that you had.
I think you have to leave that language in there
Yeah. Well, and
for the reason that you can't always predict.
makes it better administratively. But
And by the
Yes.
way, what is LOD? You keep talking about the LOD.
Oh, that was she had an abbreviation for the sheet, called it, what was it? It was, what did she call that? It's abbreviation she had for the designated alternates or something that she had. That's what. I'll find it in a minute.
Okay.
Any other comment on this, Councilman Dean? I just have a problem with "and other similar businesses." That's just kind of wide open. I mean, if someone personally just didn't like something, you could just use the term "other similar businesses." So that's where I have kind of a conflict with that.
Yeah, I think we talked about this in length, and I brought it up, and I don't, the subjectivity sometimes can do a jurisdiction a lot of harm and discourage some good things from coming in here, and I was the one that actually recommended that it be removed. So.
Trying to think of what another similar business would be that wouldn't fit in. I mean, these are the
Golf
things.
cart dealership.
Golf cart dealership? You can say car or golf cart sales. I mean,
By the way, it's a
trying to be
list of
objective.
discrepancies. List of discrepancies.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
It was going to kill me.
Don't kill me too.
So Jim, you're recommending we leave other similar businesses in there, is that your recommendation?
Well, I did, because you can't always, and I'm an old zoning administrator, you can't always predict exactly what something's going to be on a list, and that's why. Then if you get into that, you're certainly going to be able to interpret because you look and review.
But don't our land development regulations say list of permitted uses, list of conditional uses, all others prohibited? I mean, it's in the land development regulations, so I'm not even sure why it needs to be in the comp plan, to be honest.
I mean, if we have things in the land development regulations that prohibit things, and we leave this language in the comp plan, if someone comes in and they're requesting something that's not allowed by the LDRs, this isn't going to keep it out. The LDRs
No, the LDR keep it out, you're right.
So, I mean, you know, I don't.
But what if it's something that's not in the LDRs?
I think in all sections it says all other uses are prohibited under every zoning district. If I'm,
That's correct. You basically, you're permitted.
And then your conditional uses.
Prohibited. The last statement in the prohibited use section says all uses that are not specifically permitted or conditionally permitted
Are prohibited.
therefore prohibited.
It's existing language, it's been there. So has it been, I guess my question to you, has it been a problem?
No.
It's not been a problem, no.
Other council comments? Motion?
I'll move that we keep other similar businesses in
Motion?
policy 1.2.4.
Thank you. Motion by Councilwoman Gott. Do I have a second?
I'll second it, just a second it.
Motion, okay. thank you.
yeah, I just think it's.
I have a motion by council, a second by Councilman Montanaro.
I'm just trying to.
Further discussion.
I'm just trying to understand the concept. If it's in the LDRs and, you know, it's covered in the LDRs, I don't know that having this in here is going to preclude anything coming into the city that we don't want. I don't know that it's important now. I don't think it's that important in there now.
John, you have something
Yeah,
else?
one point to make is if it's not specifically called out in the comp plan, yet it's called out in the LDRs, it does allow some of the ability to request a code change and attempt to get it into the LDR because it would not be in conflict with the comp plan.
Mm-hmm. You know, the LDRs can
And so
change.
that's a different scenario.
Yeah.
And that's where leaving it in there would be beneficial.
And ultimately, council would have that say whether or not.
Yeah, but we don't know what council is gonna, you know,
Yeah.
I mean,
at
there's
that point in time vote on.
definite uses, I guess, in the past, the city did not want marina, car sales, boat sales, mobile home parks. But I think that then if that's the case, then the other similar businesses should be taken out. And as technology changes, there might be other businesses that come to town that we may want. We may want them, and the code is going to have to adjust accordingly.
Well, I know at one point in time, we had someone who came before the council, and you and I were on the council that time, and they wanted to have those little, whatever they were, those scooter things.
Yeah.
And they were gonna do it at Lori Lane, and we know, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not prohibited in what was stated here, but we knew it was another similar business. So I'm gonna support leaving another similar business in here, because I think there's that possibility that something could come, and if the LDRs are changed, this at least makes it consistent and may prevent that from happening. So I'm going to support the motion.
The scooter thing was quite a big deal there.
Yeah, I mean, and
It
we were able
it
to.
ended up going down to the commercial district off not Pine Tree, but down in Indian Harbor Beach.
Yeah.
That's where it ended up landing. So, okay.
And and from what I understand, there were a lot of complaints about it afterwards from noise and gas smells and everything else. So.
Okay. Any further discussion from council on this?
So the motion is to leave it in?
To leave it in.
Okay.
Okay. Laura?
Councilman Davis?
No,
Vice Mayor Ball?
Yes.
Councilman Montanaro?
Yes.
Councilman Ball?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
No.
Leaving it in.
Leaving it in.
Pretty easy. We're on page 4. We're moving right along here. The Very easy one we did with the grant instead of the big G. We're okay with that, aren't we?
Yes.
Okay.
Water bodies with the possessive water fund.
On 1-2-10, could you just change that the city shall continue to pursue grants and other funding sources? Makes it read a little bit
Grants.
smoother. Strike fund, the first funding.
Okay. Everybody okay with that language? Grants and other funding sources?
Yes.
Okay.
So, fine. Okay.
Okay. Water bodies is possessive. I don't think there's a problem there.
Consensus, everybody?
Yes.
Fine.
With just another little nit here. And property values, there's a comma there that shouldn't be there. And I would make that read, and the water bodies' contributions, not their water bodies.
Water bodies contribution, and there's a comma after values that goes away. Is that
Right. And the water bodies' contributions.
Okay. Everybody okay
On
with that?
policy 1.2.11, I looked at the zoning map, and all the length of east side of A1A is all residential and or public use. There's no commercial there. And then on the west side of South Patrick Drive, it's all residential. So what is the point of policy 1.2.11?
There is commercial on the east side of A1A. Sun on the beach, that area there is commercial.
Yeah, there is. And that wasn't really an issue when we,
Real estate office across from Dairy Queen, if it's still there.
On the east side of A1A?
Yeah. Where Sun on the beach is, it's commercial.
No, it's not designated on here.
It is commercial.
So
on
what you're
the
saying is
west.
you're going to, we're discouraging any increased commercial intensity on that property? We don't want that? We don't want increased commercial intensity there at the Sun on the Beach
Side
property?
of A1A?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
and that is an existing policy. You weren't before arguing about the,
I
or
mean,
discussing.
the property values on the east side of A1A wouldn't support a commercial endeavor, because there's not enough parking, there's not enough property, and there's not enough, I mean, nobody's gonna come in and put that kind of money into that area, you know.
Well, if
I don't see it
we're,
happening.
in our redevelopment plan, we're talking about satellite parking and shared parking and possibly, off-site parking for these uses. So I kind of have an issue with the concept of saying, hey, we're just not going to allow an increase of intensity at a property when there's alternative means for parking or getting people to perhaps that commercial use. I'm not sure I understand it.
I think, I'm not adverse, and I'm not agreeing with what you're saying partially, but I think we're way down the road before that's ever going to happen in Satellite Beach.
Well,
And this comp plan can be changed at that point in time when we get to that scenario, but for right now, I don't think we're anywhere close to that.
my feeling is we might be closer than you think if we're going to really develop the CRA in that district. That falls within the district. If you're going to come up with new and different things for it. I mean, if somebody came into Sun on the Beach and wanted to build a pretty neat outside restaurant and stuff that was kind of, I'm going to use the term Keys-like place, are we discouraging that type? And we are a beach town.
We are.
And people like the water, people like to eat on the water. I mean, look at restaurants on the water. And I just think, if we're going into this new phase that we really want to push the CRA, the problem with doing this is we're going to block ourselves on those few properties that we do have zoned for that type of business.
I can argue though for you that if you have commercial commercial future land use categories on the water, et cetera, that it would take quite a bit before I increase the intensity. In other words, you could do the water and you could do the mixed use and you could do the things and technically it wouldn't be increasing the intensity, although it would be greater than today. You follow what I'm saying? In other words, it's how they use intensity. For example, if I had a floor area ratio of 0.2 and I moved it to a 1, then I would be changing the intensity, and then you would get into that. But in other words, as layman, you think intensity is going from this to now it's got the restaurant on the water, et cetera. You haven't increased intensity the way they think about it. Am I not clear?
Well, yeah, I understand. I'm just trying to figure out what's the definition of how
Yeah,
are they
so-
figuring out intensity.
So I'm saying it's a little bit more broad, gives you a little more broadness than you think it does.
Okay, and just FYI,
Now,
on
the
the,
density increase, you're limited by charter. I mean, you couldn't do a residential change in density anyway,
On your-
until you would have a referendum.
your future land use map shows that property is residential.
Well, you're again talking about we would have to take care of that when it comes to when we do that. You're talking about the 100 acres again?
No, I'm talking about the commercial property. We're talking about Sun on the Beach. It's shown as residential.
I don't, again,
Even
that
if
was
it's
a
commercial use.
representation. We're not, the map that you saw was not reflecting everything.
Mr. Mayor, on this item, we were just supposed to be looking at making water bodies possessive.
That's right.
You know, if the council wants to talk about, do we need policy 1.2.11, then that needs to be sent back to the comp board for them to look at. It's not for us to be eliminating these policies here now that were not part of what we considered from the board.
I understand, but I agree. But this is our venue to find those particular items if we have to send them back.
Well, I think we can make a recommendation that we approve it the way it is and then send this particular item back to the board for further consideration. But for right now, I think we're here to accept what changes are being proposed to us by the board and that have been recommended by the board.
That's what we're here to vote on. So, okay. Any further discussion? Lenore?
What are we voting on?
I thought you didn't do a...
No, it's
Okay.
basically a consensus.
All right.
And it's just the two small changes.
Yeah.
We took out a comma and we took out a IR, so it's the water
We added
bodies,
the word
right?
there.
All right.
We added the word
I'm
there.
good.
Thank you.
Next one, we had, I think everybody agreed to removing the references to the percentage of build-out. Remember, we had gone through 98, 92, and we tried to reconstruct sentences that I think make sense without that. And I put them-
On objective 1.3, just one little thing, on the second full line over to the right, have been made known to the city. You see where I am?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
To the city and legal means are available to make them. Okay. Everybody okay with everything on that page that has to do with percentages?
Consensus?
Consensus with the
Yes,
one
sir.
small change?
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on, page 5. Last sentence should end with receiving areas, protected risk property values. And I show it as an alternate, but I think it was a direction, wasn't it? Surrounding development patterns within the receiving areas and protect at-risk property values. Is that what everybody thought? I think it is.
That sounds correct.
Is that correct in everybody's mind?
I think so.
Council?
I'm fine.
Consensus on that?
We're accepting the alternate versions,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, and on the bottom line of that, at risk should be hyphenated.
Right. I had it somewhere else.
Motion or consensus here?
I'm good.
Good. Cheryl?
I got a little lost there because I was reading back. What policy are we?
1.9.
9.1, and look at the alternate because that's kind of the direction I had, and if I'm not mistaken, it might have come from the CPAB and I didn't have it right, I'm not sure exactly, but the only thing that we're changing on it is putting it in a hyphen with that risk. But
Good.
added the words protected risk property values at the end of the sentence.
Consensus?
Yep.
Yes. Cheryl?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, policy 1.10.1, retain the last strikeout, which primarily served the needs of the residents of Satellite Beach. You got two choices. You either have it go out, or you have it stay in. The alternate shows which primarily serves the needs of the residents of Satellite Beach. It's just a policy decision, however you want to do it.
I think it should stay, it should be in there that serves the needs of the residents of Satellite Beach.
Discussion?
Well, I just think you're really limiting, I mean, can someone survive, can a business survive just based on the needs of the residents or the people of Satellite Beach? I don't know if that should be in your comp plan. There are other people from Indian Harbor or Brevard County or whoever may, you know, we're not a little island that survives on our own. We rely on the adjoining jurisdictions, and I really don't think it needs to be in our comp plan that we need to encourage businesses which primarily serve the needs of the residents of Satellite Beach. I don't know if all businesses could survive just on the businesses of folks in Satellite Beach. That's just an honest statement.
Council?
I'm fine if it's taken out. I mean, it is, I'm fine.
The
if
beach
it's
is,
taken out.
I think, pretty good last time.
Is that what this is what the board recommended?
Yep. 1.10.1. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second that.
And that is to take it out or leave it in?
Yeah, so move what?
He's
Take it
moving
out.
to take it
Take it
out,
out.
and I'm seconding it.
A motion by Vice Mayor Brimer, second by Councilman Montanaro on policy 1.10.1. Take out which primarily serves the needs of the residents of Satellite Beach. That's what's going to be taken out, correct?
Yeah, that's where
Any
we're.
further discussion?
Yeah. I think my understanding of the history of this city has been that this is a bedroom community and that the residents want it to stay that way. I don't know how many times I have heard our residents say, I don't want Satellite Beach to be another Cocoa Beach, meaning drawing tourists, or Miami Beach, meaning wall-to-wall condos on the beach. And it's been my understanding that the businesses that we like to attract here are the kinds of businesses that our residents need. Grocery stores, drugstores, dry cleaners, that sort of thing. And I am really loath to do anything to get away from that tradition and that philosophy regarding our city.
For any other discussion?
I don't think anybody wants to see the area become a Cocoa Beach or a Miami Beach, but I just don't think that language needs to be put in the comp plan. The land development regulations list which uses are permitted in zoning districts. They have certain uses that are conditional uses and and the rest are prohibited. So we control that through our land development regulations.
And I think we've, over the years, have made it where the beach isn't going to be like Miami Beach and so forth. We own 40% of the beach, and we have done things to prohibit that. We've made parks, and so, and really, anytime a business comes, I think it helps the citizens of this town, no matter what it is. And if that business can survive because of our beaches and so forth, they're going to stay here. I've seen a lot of businesses come that it doesn't get supported by just a small population of the city. They don't do good, and therefore you have vacant buildings and so forth. So I don't really see where the term needs to be there. And I don't think it's really telling that our policy is that we want to look like Miami Beach or Cocoa Beach and so forth. But I just don't think the makeup of the town, the way it sits now, can ever be that way. We would have to change an awful lot of regulations and ordinances to ever look like, a Cocoa Beach. So.
I look at the businesses that have come to our city. Our LDRs pretty much spell out what's allowed and what's not allowed, and I think all the businesses that have predominantly come here since I've lived here have benefited the residents of Satellite Beach. I don't know that, there's nothing to my knowledge that's ever come here that didn't. We know we don't want, Indian Harbor's got a Lowe's. We're never going to have a Home Depot here. I don't see it happening. That's not the big box stuff that we're looking for, but you know, the businesses that have come here that have always pretty much supported and been used by the residents. I don't know it needs to be in the comp plan.
Any further discussion? Do you have a motion on the floor? Lenore?
Councilman Dean?
Yes.
Councilman Dodd?
No.
Councilman Montanaro?
Yes.
Councilman Biden?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes.
Next,
Motion
One
carries.
little change, you've got as provided and allowed, that's redundant, I would strike provided and just say as allowed in the updated LDRs.
That's fine.
Fine with everyone?
I'm fine with that.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on.
and I just want to make sure that that one's accepted with the provided and going out. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. If you turn to the next page, the first three would be items that we took care of on the PowerPoint. The FEMA, the transportation, and the Legends colors, etc. So we're now on housing element down at the bottom, page 3.1. I think that's just a water bodies with the apostrophe after the S. Shouldn't be a problem.
Consensus?
Next, we're good with everything?
Same thing there, no, there should be no comma after values, and they get and the water bodies contribution.
Right. I would have thought we would have matched it up, but thank you. Okay, next page. Change throughout the document for short-term and long-term. We took care of that. And just so you know, the next time you see this on the 20th, for the meeting on the 20th, if you do defer to the 20th, we'll have a document, we'll have all these things in it. Okay, so that one's okay. May to shall, policy, see, may to shall, the wording was not agreed to and should be added as an item. Okay, so we have an alternate there that you shall promote hardening or you may promote hardening. That's your choices on this one.
I think we had a long discussion about shall and will, which really are the same, so we changed everything to shall. And there are times where it's appropriate to use the word may, and I think in this case may is appropriate, and other times throughout other documents and also this document where may is also appropriate. Shall is mandatory.
Well, I think the shall should be in there because it's talking about promoting, and it seems to me that it would be a very wise policy for the city to have to encourage or promote hardening of structures against wind and water damage. We're certainly in an area where we are prone to damage. And I just think that we should be promoting it.
I would ask the question, are we promoting the hardening of residential structures and commercial structures, and we're looking at telling people they should build armoring on the ocean? I don't think that's what we're asking, and I don't think that's what we're telling people. I don't want to see armoring along the ocean, but you put shell in there, and I think you've just created that scenario for residential dwellings, for water damage.
I don't take the word promote meaning you shall do such and such.
But I think it puts the city in a situation where we're condoning that we would allow or would want that stuff. I don't think we want armoring along the beach because that causes more erosion and then we lose the beach. So, I mean, I would rather leave it as may, and then we're not taking the position.
We're not talking about the beach, we're talking about structures.
Talking about, well, when you
Structures.
say water damage to residential structures, look at the structures along the beach. What are they? They're residential structures. Am I off base, Mr. LaRue?
No, you're right. I mean, it can cover those areas.
It would cover that. I mean, then we're putting the word shall in there that we're promoting that type of hardening, and I don't think it's been the city's position ever to condone hardening along the beach.
All right, what's hardening? Define hardening.
Resistant to,
What?
resistant to, such as shutters,
Any kind of
seawalls, seawalls.
Seawalls is part of it?
You know, I would, once you add water bodies in there, and, you clearly we're talking about tropical storms and hurricanes, and we all know that the majority of them come from the east, and those are going to be impacting the beach, and so that would be one way of hardening those waterfront homes would be encouraging bulkheads.
But that's not part of the structure. A seawall is not part of the residential or commercial structure. I see hardening as shutters and hurricane straps on your roof and, that kind of stuff.
Maybe you need May just because we're not real clear on what everything is going to be done. That, if first
I
was
look at somebody coming in and being able to read that language and interpret it, however they want to interpret it, and when you say water bodies and residential structures, you're telling them that, to me, I read that as they could put armoring in front of their residences at the beach.
And see, I don't get that at all out of this. And so we've got a policy here that's confusing, and we've got reasons people
I would say
disagree.
if our board suggested May, which I believe that's what they,
what I'm starting with.
that's where we started, I would go with what the board suggested, which is May.
And then bring it back to the board for consideration to change it so it's clear. I got a list going here.
Yeah, I think the board needs to take a look at this.
And I think I also had in here from the last meeting 1.81, again, you have the city shall encourage the use of renewable energy sources in all new construction. And I think that should be May. I mean, that's it's an important thing, but it could be cross prohibitive and drive a business or out of town, or anybody's doing new construction.
Okay, so we wanted
So
to look at.
1.81 also, I think, needs to go back.
No, 1.81 was not
Wait,
part of what
wait,
we're doing.
hold on. Let's finish 1.7.2.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to leave it to, right now someone says leave it to put May.
May.
Bring it back to
The
the
board.
comp board to look at 1.7.2 and look at what hardening means too.
Yep.
Because I'm going to tell you, hardening means to me, and I would never want to see, the water's coming, it's part of nature. And you're going to put something there hard. Ooh.
Well, you can look at what it's done. I mean, the seawall that's to the north of the Gemini property, and there's another one to the south of it. It erodes the Gemini property. I mean, that's what's happening.
What we'll also do, if you don't mind, is what we'll do is we'll probably go ahead and transmit with the May, but we'll have enough time to be able to have somebody look at it.
Okay.
Do we have a motion or a consensus on May?
Consensus for May.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
Cheryl?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yes, okay. Okay, thank you. Moving on.
Moving on, infrastructure, let's see. I think we had to switch 113 remain where it was, and 112 would actually have encouraged the utility provider. I think that was just instructions on that one because you had control of that. Everybody okay with it?
Okay.
So we're going with alternate 1, 2.
Oh, wait a minute, I had a question. Give me just a second. In the current policy, it says that the city shall relocate, and in the alternate, it says the city shall encourage the utility provider to relocate. My question is, which would get the job done? In other words, is the possibility or probability that if the city did it, it would be done faster than if we waited for FPL, for instance?
I think the discussion came down to the fact you didn't control that, so that's why you ended up with the provider. I don't think you could influence them, but you didn't have the major control of relocating, so that's why we changed it.
Okay.
Because I had the same question at first. But
Well, then, in that case, as resources and opportunity allow, we don't need that. Because it's not going to cost us anything to encourage the utility providers.
well, that may be some different things that you're doing on 13. That's why support post-storm recovery and continuity of government after major storm events. Provide emergency power at its critical facilities. That's a different policy for a different thing.
I'm not with you.
Well, policy 1.13.
I thought we were on 1/112.
We are. I thought you were going back to 113. I thought we were okay with 1.1.12.
As it is now, or the alternate?
The alternate.
Alternate one.
Okay, so I'm saying if we pick that one, then we don't need as resources and opportunity to allow, because it's not going to cost us anything to encourage the utility companies to do this.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't picking up
Come
that.
out.
Yeah, you can take that out.
Consensus on that?
That's true.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You're right.
And now on to 1.
As resources and opportunity allow comes out. Is that
Yeah.
correct? Yeah. Okay. I'll catch up here in a minute. All right, 1.113. Encourage the utility, and then alternate, as resources and opportunity allow, provide. That one you didn't have the encourage utility, you just provide. That's your responsibility. Correct?
So we're saying the alternate.
The alternate?
We want the
Is
alternate.
what we're taking, yes.
Okay. All right.
Consensus?
Yes.
Okay, 4.4, 1.2.8, stormwater should be one word. We did do that, so we took care of that. 4.5, 1.36, I think you were concerned about if you didn't ever have franchise agreements with City of Melbourne, you might have other alternate franchise agreements, and I put that in. I think that was the direction I had. Becomes an alternate because it's different than what we had.
Yes.
Everybody all right with that?
Yes.
Consensus on that?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, we got a series of coastal management conservation elements with the choice of shall versus may on 1.17 is where it starts. That's the policy that you had. It's up to you.
I think on 1.17, I mean, we own 40% of the beachfront property, and I'm not opposed to purchasing additional property, but I think it should be may, not mandatory. May as resources and opportunity allow.
I agree with that.
I agree.
I think the whole thing is moot at this point in time. I don't ever see us buying more than 40% of the beachfront, and I think this should go back to the board for them to take a look at.
You're saying you don't, you feel that this is,
It's a
shouldn't be in here any longer?
Yeah, I mean,
But my feeling would be the city may, it doesn't mean you will, but it leaves it open
Why don't we
that.
put it as may and then go back to the board with that other item and then let them look at it long term? Okay.
So 1.1's back to the board, comp board to remove that? To take a look at
yes,
it?
see if we still need it.
Long term wise, we're going to still transmit it with may, is that
Yes,
my understanding?
the alternate.
Alternate.
I'm fine with sending it back, but I would see if conditions allow and there's property that comes available, I would like to be able to see us be able to buy property. I mean, look at Shell Street. I mean, you have 3 places there that could be falling into the ocean anytime soon. If that bad storm comes, why would we, I'm fine sending it back to the.
Yeah, I'm fine to send it back, but I like it in there just because it allows you the option in the future. We don't know
Then
what it
don't
holds.
send it back.
Don't send it back.
Don't send it back.
It is may and we'll review it.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Just let it stand.
Let it stand.
With May?
With Matt's
With May.
consensus. Thank you.
Let's see, next page, page 9, we're cranking along here. Let's see. Identify the period, the end should be within the parentheses. Okay, we did that. Alternate.
Wait.
An alternate, we took out the new language, is what the alternate was on this one. This is on policy 1.32. Remember this had to do with their adaptation area? You remember the new language that the state provided, and we had that as came from your CPAB, that this was a possibility at some point if you haven't established the adaptation area, but you could when you end up doing, and it would be consistent with the state language.
Well,
But the alternate was not to go any further than just coordinate with service providers, which is less than what the board had recommended to.
So the board recommended 1.3.2.
Right, with the red language there.
The red language.
That first one, that came from your CPAB.
Okay.
and,
Discussion?
I do, and we talked about this before, where I'm not inherently opposed to an adaptation action area. I think we need to establish the area first before it's put in our comp plan. And I feel very strongly about it. We had a coastal high hazard area. Well, we still have it actually, but it encompasses really just water. It used to encompass part of the properties along A1A and a lot of the properties west side of South Patrick Drive. And since then, I guess you probably do a better job explaining it. The slosh model now dictates where that coastal high hazard area is.
That's right, it shrinks it and you don't have the conflict you had before, so it's less of a problem than you had before, but the state did allow you the opportunity to be talking about areas that could be severe in terms of flooding damage, et cetera. And the adaptation area language, one of the reasons why it was put in there is there are some grants available out there to where you can look at areas that may be subject to that, and that was one of the reasons why that language was consistent with the new state language.
But, go ahead. But you still have to adopt an adaptation plan. So
At some point.
It's kind of like how Pelican Coast is future land use is RLA, and say leave it until they come. Well, if this is something the city truly wants to focus on, then let's have the plan, and then we can always amend the comp plan to include an adaptation area. But I don't see, there's really no hard evidence or any kind of study or documentation that's presented to me to warrant putting this in our comprehensive plan.
Let me ask you, one part of putting it in here is you're saying there's grants available
There are.
in the future and so forth, and what it does if it's in here is that we need to look at that as developing a plan at some point down the road, correct?
Yes.
And the state wants to see this type of language in there?
Well, they certainly have given you that as part of some of the 2011 new language. That's right.
I look at this as they're giving us a tool to use. And if we put this tool in our toolbox and work out whatever the plan is later, we're at least on the forefront. If something is available grant-wise, it's that tool in the toolbox. So I'm in favor of it.
Well, I have to tell you though, when you're looking at this adaptation action area, and I'm looking right at the statute, you're looking at areas that experience coastal flooding due to extreme high tides and storm surge. And if you designate a part of the city as an adaptation area, you may affect property values. So I think and especially if you put it in your comp plan, you need to be very careful. Although we may be able to go after some grant money, I would prefer to see that plan before it's inserted in our comp plan, and we can always do an amendment to the comprehensive plan to add it.
I think it needs to be in here.
It's an enabling act for you to be able to do it.
I mean, the plan comes later.
Right, you're not specifying. In fact, I think you're better off not to have the battle now. You're
Right.
putting it in place so that and the next policy is along with that 1.4A1.
Yeah.
Where they kind of go together, so you might as well look at both of them. You either keep both or put them out.
Okay. Let's do,
I'll move that we keep policy 1.32 as proposed by the board with two changes. Second line, no comma after infrastructure, and in the bottom line, in which the adaptation insert action in front of area is established.
I'll second it.
Right.
have a motion by Councilwoman Dodd, a second by Councilman Montanaro.
Further discussion?
Yes, I would like to also say, I mean, y'all weren't here when the coastal high hazard area issue came up and the people were out the door. When you start designating people's properties in an adaptation area, I think you're going to get some backlash from the community. So I just want to put that on the record.
Okay. Further discussion? Hearing none, Lenore?
Councilman Dean.
No.
Vice Mayor Barnes.
Yes.
Councilman Montanaro.
Yes.
Councilman Dodd.
Yes.
Mayor Patino.
Yes.
And policy 1.4A is pretty much putting the standards in. I don't think we specifically said that, but that goes along with what you just did.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the board's recommendation on policy 14A.1.
I have a motion by Councilman
Second.
Second by Vice Mayor Breimer. Further discussion?
Just the same thing on the adaptation action area. I don't think it needs to be put in the comp plan before the plan is developed.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Lenore?
No.
Councilman Dodd.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Barnes.
Yes.
Councilman Montanaro.
Yes.
Mayor Patino.
Yes.
Well, we're coming right along here. Page 10, we had another coastal policy, which I think the language there of concern was we encourage population concentration away from known or predicted high hazard areas. That's consistent with the new state language takes us away from direct population concentration. Remember, that's how we had before, or what language we had before, and it's less of a mandate or less of a requirement of directing population concentration because the language has changed somewhat. So I think you are, by the language, encourage population concentrations. You're trying not to make it an area where you would end up having too much intensity. But then again, you added the phrase, you remember, that came from the CPAB, that's not intended to prohibit or discourage maintenance or replacement of existing developments, so you don't get into that problem of taking somebody's house when they're trying to rebuild. I think that was long talked by the group itself in terms of CPAB.
Move that we approve policy 1.4C.
Excuse me, please.
3 as submitted by the board.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilwoman Gott, second by Councilman
I couldn't hear. What was
Montanaro.
the policy again?
1.4C.3, page 10. Second, first item.
This is about wetlands, right?
Further discussion?
Oh, I have my
on it?
pages mixed up. Sorry.
Okay.
Here we go again.
Further discussion?
No.
Okay. Mark?
There we go. Again, I have an issue. 1.C3, you're encouraging population concentrations away from coastal high hazard areas, which are our water bodies, our bulkheads, and our beaches. I know it's not intended to prohibit or discourage maintenance or replacement of existing development within the coastal high hazard area, which is the water, by the way, but it doesn't really need to be in the comp plan.
Okay. Further discussion? Lenore?
Councilman Dean.
No.
Vice Mayor Barnes.
Yes.
Councilman Montanaro.
Yes.
Councilman Dodd.
Yes.
Yes.
You had a question on 5.5, policy 1.53. Somebody asked me whether or not, since, remember, you had that whole litany of things about the marinas and different uses that weren't allowed in the future land use element. Why did you need it here in the coastal? I kind of went back and forth.
I got it. I read this. I'm okay.
Sorry?
Yeah.
So you were the complainer, right?
Yeah, I was.
Okay.
Consensus on that, okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Moving on.
The next one was whether or not we needed the policy about St. John's Water Management District to develop an updated and integrated water resources management plan. the alternate, of course, would be take it out. I'm not sure that I had the right direction from the CPAB. Does anybody remember whether it was, I think the reason it's on here as the alternate is because I didn't have the direction from the board correct the last time. Does that ring a bell with somebody?
No.
This policy, I don't think, was recommended to stay in.
Oh, yeah, I have delete right here.
Okay.
Okay.
So really, I'm recommending the alternate based on my action last time. Everybody okay with that?
Alternate. To delete,
Yes.
is consensus? Okay.
I've been with you probably 5 years. We haven't done an integrated water resources management plan yet, so I'm not sure you need to get involved in that. Okay, next page, 11. You've changed where wetlands came. The alternate is direct away from wetlands. I think that was just a language kind of a change. I think this is what I was directed to do, so the alternate is what you want.
And I would still, and this is a question because I did ask, what is a wetland? In our city, we don't have freshwater wetlands or minimal freshwater wetlands on Sampson's Island. Are you considering wetlands the water bodies?
There were some areas that we talked about as wetlands, as I remember, but it is water bodies. It should be water bodies as well. My understanding was you did have a couple wetland areas, but
You want some amplification?
Please.
Tom Fergus, CPAB member. Lansing Highland has a 50-foot easement all the way around the water body. That is a St. John's and a state designated wetland. It is a jurisdictional wetland. We have 12 or 13 acres of jurisdictional wetlands on Sampson's Island. These are areas that normally are above the normal tide, but occasionally are inundated. And you have low wetlands, high wetlands, different plants grow. They're an important part of the system. And I don't know what else to say. Those are the primary. The beach isn't a wetland on the ocean. That's a joke. It's primarily Sampson's Island, and I don't believe anything's designated on Tortoise Island.
Not that I know of.
But there are designated. We have quite a few acres of jurisdictional wetlands in this city.
Okay, thank you very much.
And like I said, I understand there are wetlands out on Sampson's Island, and I of course, on Lansing Island, they have the wetland buffer, but you're directing all future land uses away from the wetlands and wetland functions, which means anything that wetland flows into as a wetland function. Is that the canals? You're going to discourage development along the canals or any function of that wetland? That's why I was asking for more clarification, because other than Sampson's Island and that buffer around Lansing Island, we don't have any freshwater wetlands. And that's why I'm asking, are you considering the water bodies wetlands?
well, you're considering the areas that are near the water bodies that way. And the other thing that you need to remember is this is part of one of the state requirements that you are to direct away from wetlands areas in terms of a policy that you need to have. So you would have that regardless of what you specifically pointed out. But in the areas that he described are areas that you would protect and would have to be consistent with the language of the state in this area. So I don't,
So can
this
you-
is the existing policies. We're not fighting over, we were fighting over a little bit of the language, but it's one that you had. I would not want to be taking it out at this point.
Would you want to use the word freshwater wetlands or
I leave it
just
the way it
wetlands?
is.
Okay.
Leave it the way it is.
I move that we approve the alternate wording of policy 1.59.
Second.
Motion by Councilwoman Gotz, second by Councilman Vice Mayor Brimer. Any further discussion? Hearing none, poll the council, please.
Councilwoman Dean.
Yes?
Councilman Montanaro.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Breimer.
Yes.
Councilman Dodd.
Yes.
Mayor Patino.
Yes.
Some pretty simple ones on this, the rest of this page. We had low level, hyphenation, adaptation was a little better than adoption, so we changed that. Recreation and open space, I think we had something where we had financial and budgetary, so we took out budgetary. Those are simple grammar kind of directions, but we did them. Can we do all of these on this page?
Yep.
Everybody
Consensus
okay
on
with
that?
it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, 12, policy 1.21, keeping this policy would depend on that. We kept the 70% discussion. Policy 1.2.1 will continue to require within its development regulations the provision of open space as a condition of land development. Open space is a little bit different than impervious, but I know what she's talking about in terms of the relation of the bulk to the land area. So you would, based on your action before, you would keep policy 1.2.1 the way it is.
So moved.
Motion by Councilwoman Gott, second by Vice Mayor Breimer. Further discussion? Hearing none? Lenore?
Councilwoman Dean.
1 second. No, just because of my vote earlier.
Councilman Montanaro.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Breimer.
Yes.
Councilman Dodd.
Yes.
Mayor Patino.
Yes.
I think there was some language on the other one about you wanted to implement efforts to, I'm not sure what we ended up with on the alternate of 1.3. Shall implement to the extent. We now have the alternate shows after federal partners, the city will implement efforts to develop an ocean greenway so as to preserve. Was it your recollection that we were just moving the words around? Is that what?
Yes, the introductory
That's what it
clause.
was. The introductory clause went away and we used it. Okay, I'm with you now.
Yeah.
I think it just reads better now.
That's fine.
In the alternate, if everybody's okay with it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, next page.
Oh, wait a minute.
No?
On that alternate, you've got the city will implement, there's a will,
Oh, no. Did we do that?
that's one.
All right, you got me. Shall.
Shall.
Get by with just one, I'm all right. Capital improvements element, the hyphenation of short and long term. Both the short term, 5-year and long term period, we changed that. The next question was on 8A was.
By the way, before you move on, 5-year and 10-year should also be hyphenated.
Yeah. 10-year. Okay. Now, you asked about the current chart. We ended up with a new chart that you have that's been updated, and that's the new construction work plan by the school. So if that's acceptable, we'll do that. Everybody okay?
Yep.
Next page, getting close, 14, community appearance element. Time frame of at least every 10 years is requested to be placed on an item for discussion. I gave you an alternate that I thought everybody could be happy with, because I'm not sure you need to be having this every 10 years or whatever, but city shall require your land development regulations to be updated on a regular basis, addressing a review of its land development regulations on a regular basis for revisions addressing signs, et cetera, because first of all, I don't think you need to wait until 10 years to do something when you're actively looking at stuff. And I just thought it'd be easier that you just went ahead and did it on a needed basis, because you're going to do that anyway. Why argue about that? You know, you feel you got money and time and resources, you're going to look at your land development regulations.
I would even question the use of on a regular basis. I think it should be from time to time. There may not be a need on a regular basis.
Well, in the eyes of the beholder, I mean, you,
What defines a regular basis?
yeah, I think it doesn't matter to me, but I mean, it's enough that you'd be looking at it. From time to time sounds so, once in a while, I don't know. What your language, whatever.
I like the regular basis.
Yeah, I do too.
May I propose a wording change here to,
Okay.
I had trouble getting through the wording on this thing. I'd like to see it read, city shall require a review of its land development regulations on a regular basis to strengthen provisions for signage, comma, buffering between incompatible / non-conforming land uses, comma, and code requirements for commercial site renovations.
If you give me that language, it's a deal.
Want it again?
Yeah.
Okay. After on a regular basis.
Right, address it.
To strengthen provisions
Okay,
for signage, comma,
signage, comma,
buffering between incompatible / non-conforming land uses,
okay,
comma, and code requirements for commercial site
Okay.
renovations.
okay, I'm with you now. Okay,
I move that we
So
approve.
we just want a consensus.
Consensus, okay.
Is that consensus?
Very good.
Yes, sorry. Okay.
okay, and the last one we had was a choice question on the use of implement, and I think we had a language change to policy 1.34, the city shall continue to update and revise land development regulations related to signage to balance the needs of so and so. I think that's different than implementing means you're going to carry out what's already written, so that was,
And I would strike and revise because it's redundant with update.
okay?
Questions on this?
Looks good.
Consensus?
Yeah.
Okay,
The alternate.
yes.
Alternate
One
with
point-
the change,
yeah.
revised comes out, right?
Yeah, and revise.
Okay,
And revised.
thank you. Let me, at this time, no discussion from council, let me open it up for public comment. Any public comment?
Rich Edgington, resident and a member of the Comprehensive Planning Board. On the policy 14C3, where it was changed, this policy is not intended to prohibit or discourage maintenance or replacement. That came about when we were talking at a board meeting about, it was put forth that the way the wording read, if a weather event came up the coast and inundated what was then coastal high hazard area, which now I find out has moved back, but if it inundated it and there was damage, that some people interpreted this as we're not going to go back there. The exact words from people at the meeting were, I don't want to have to pay for roads that might be flooded again. Roads cost $1 million a mile. Another one, sea level rise is going to happen, the city can't keep paying for roads. When it was put up that if we don't pay for the roads, what's going to happen to those houses down there? And a city employee that was at the meeting said blight. That was the word. So a lot of discussion evolved, and some changes were made, but I still feel that the intent, the overall intent eventually, it's the sea level rise study that was made was a predecessor, and some of these policies are geared towards moving back from that area over there, I believe. They've taken out the coastal high hazard area, but left in adaptation area. And it just kind of playing it as, well, it's just words, but words mean things, and there is a definition of adaptation area. And if I recall correctly, it's an area that can be determined by the city that goes beyond the coastal high hazard area. In other words, if the coastal high hazard area goes up to the bulkhead and it floods up halfway up the block, the city can determine that that is now an adaptation area and can now decide to either go in or not go in. We don't know if they're going to go in because there's also disaster response, excuse me. The city has adopted its own version of the county's emergency management plan and the plan prioritizes post-disaster cleanup activities, establishes procedures for securing disaster relief, and here's the kicker, regulates location and type of reconstruction of damaged structures, and establishes legal authority of implementation. I've looked on the city website and I see this nowhere. I haven't seen, I went to the county site and it doesn't tell me that there's a city site or that there's a city post-disaster plan. Granted, I was away for a while, I had family emergency out in Arizona, so maybe that has come too. But how can we put the cart before the horse? We're saying that we're going to adopt this, and we're going to be regulated by what the post-disaster plan calls for, and we don't have a post-disaster plan. So, I mean, it's kind of putting the cart before the horse, or if we pass it and then read it, one of those kind of things. You know, and it's been said a couple of times tonight about, you know, different boards, different city councils may interpret things differently. So while you guys wouldn't, other city boards in the future may, so be careful.
Thank you. Any further public discussion?
Ron Dragutis, resident, Satellite Beach. I'd like to know, based on this special meeting, how much money is truly being saved into fast-tracking this. 2, this is perhaps one of the most important documents, other than the budget, CRA plan, land development regulations. And I know this has gone on for a while. There were a few meetings in the prior year. Meetings are not tested and tried in a prior year during a previous council, and we are now pushing this through. We have a first reading. And all these factors are being brought in that are being looked at, and y'all are signing off on. Citizens have not even seen the maps that were presented to you today. And as I look at the statutes for the adaptation plan, I too believe it is something ahead of the horse, the cart before the horse. And additionally, you talk about, I'd like to know where this came about. I do have some knowledge on where this came about. And I know the toolbox exists out there. There's about 150 pages for the Florida toolbox. And we're going to see property values erode here. And I wonder how this city is going to exist with this erosion of property values? And isn't it potentially a form of eminent domain, especially when we read in the newspaper that our beach has increased by 3 inches in the last couple of years? I have a conundrum with that. And where is our sand on the beach to protect these properties? This city has not signed off or wrote a letter of affirmation to the Corps of Engineers to assist in helping maintain the dune structure. And in maintaining this dune structure, what everyone fails to realize now, and I didn't want to bring this up tonight, all the people wanting to avoid hardening, mitigation, a long-term plan, when you look at New Jersey and New York where they planned it out properly and did it right over many, many years, their property tax base has been preserved. And as far as I'm concerned, everyone sitting here, around here, who does not understand that this year additionally, there will be dead turtles on the beach. And why is that? I want you to think for yourselves. Why are they going to be dead? Thank you.
Any further public discussion?
Ken Lindeman, resident Satellite Beach, member of the CPAB. I want to thank the council for its deliberations. We live on a barrier island. Good governance involves thinking ahead. Good planning involves thinking ahead. We are in a very dynamic time. It's very difficult for citizens as well as professional scientists to separate the many claims. Governance is further confused now by paranoia becoming almost a national pastime. That isn't necessarily a bad thing. In science, a good scientist constantly looks over his shoulder. But good governance involves looking ahead. Having been on the CPA for now, I believe, over 2 years, I am surprised at the level of indirect, if not direct, disrespect the CPAB receives from many quarters. I also understand it. Regarding fast-tracking, I think that there's an argument that this is not being fast-tracked. At the same time, I would suggest that the council certainly should make this document as available as possible. We've had extensive conversations with extensive public comment opportunities going back for at least 12 months on this document. I have never heard anybody on the CPAB talk about abandoning any part of this city. And I am personally and professionally somewhat tired of that accusation. Regarding adaptation action areas, this is an opportunity to look forward. There is nothing in this document saying we will move to identify these areas, which is actually, I would suggest, the prudent way to go. Putting the language in the plan shows that we are far-thinking, but we are not moving too fast. It enables us to get the money potentially for stormwater enhancements that could increase property values in flood areas. We have an opportunity to get funding to protect areas more prone to flooding. My understanding is that by getting this language into the comp plan, we don't bind ourselves to take any actions. We can increase our ability to get stormwater improvement funding. In the current era, I can see few reasons to try to increase our stormwater management funding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further citizens' comments? Hearing none, bring it back to council. Council?
I have a couple things. I have the comprehensive plan changes workshop memorandum from Mr. Lurie's office dated back in 12/19/11. And as I said before, we used to have a coastal high hazard designation area, which included the east side of A1A and also all of the property on the west side of South Patrick Drive. And I would like to read this. Bear with me one second. And this is part of the policies that used to be in the comp plan. The coastal high hazard areas east of State Road A1A and west of State Road 513 South Patrick Drive include areas that have experienced severe damage or are scientifically predicted to experience damage from storm surge, waves, and erosion. The city shall direct population concentrations away from those coastal high hazard areas, consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the featured land use element in the Satellite Beach Comprehensive Plan. So there clearly was an intent to direct population concentrations away from the west side of South Patrick Drive and the east side of A1A. That was a policy that was in our comprehensive plan or was proposed. So I just wanted to make sure you're aware of that. Now, the state changed their requirements, and we had to follow the slosh model and the Hurricane 1 category, which became the new coastal high hazard area, which became our water line. And there are other notes in this, and I'll be happy to share this with everybody. It says that the coastal high hazard area is irrelevant since the state changed the definition of coastal high hazard area. It leaves most of the city outside this protective designation. However, the state has identified a new designation, adaptation action area, that could be used to good effect. And this goes on and on and on. So there is, unfortunately, the perception in the community that there is, via this comp plan, a drive to drive people away from the water bodies on the west side of A1A and the east, South Patrick Drive and the east side of A1A. So I just wanted to put that in. I never discredited the work that the volunteers do. They've done a tremendous job. But when you talk about people's property rights and defining an area where you're going to say that you would like to adapt or move them out of an area, it became a very sticky subject. And like I said, after this meeting, there was a meeting here where the people were out the door and down the road because of it. So I think you really need to be careful what you are approving in your comprehensive plan, because the adaptation action area is exactly what it is. It's an adaptation action area. So I don't have a problem doing it as long as there's a plan and there's data that supports it, rather than just throwing it in a comprehensive plan, because it does affect people's lives and their property rights.
Thank you. And now we're closed.
Okay.
Sorry.
I would just suggest that is somewhat out of context.
Thank you.
No one is talking about abandoning.
I appreciate it, but thank you. Further council comment?
Yes. Give me just 1 second.
Okay.
Well, while she's doing that, I don't think it's anybody's intention up here to do anything to anybody's property. I know from going to a hurricane conference probably 7 or 8 years ago, after the storm that hit, I guess it was Charlie in 2004, and the person who gave the seminar was the city manager of Sanibel. And basically what we're doing with this adaptation plan, the adaptation area, is identifying an area in the city that could qualify for potential grant funding later on. And the same thing happened there. They hadn't provided any scenarios for different areas in the Sanibel area, and when they submitted all their bills to FEMA, FEMA didn't pay those bills. You know, we don't want to put ourselves in a situation, if we're in a position where we can capitalize on getting reimbursements when we make these improvements in the adaption area, because we're going to go in and fix the roads. We're not going to go, I mean, if something happens on Anderson Court or on Barcelona Court, we're not going to tell the people we're not going to fix the roads. We're going to go in there and fix them. And then we're going to try to get our money back from FEMA or whoever we're going to be able to get it back from. And as long as we have crossed our T's and dotted our I's, we'll get that money. If we haven't done that, they're not going to pay us, just like they didn't pay Sanibel. So all I'm looking at is, I'm looking down the road to make sure that we're going to be able to tell the people that live on these streets or that live close to the ocean that we're going to be able to go in and help them. I have no intention of making the city not take care of what the city's responsibilities are to our residents.
And I appreciate that, but when you go back and you look at the verbatim documentation, it says to drive population concentrations away from those areas. And that became very concerning to a lot of people in this community.
The intention of the state itself is to get people off of areas where they deem it to be dangerous. Because I sat here when Dr. Randall Parkinson came and presented before the council, and I sat and listened to all the people basically make remarks to him that he didn't know what he was talking about. This man has a ton of information available to him, and when you talk about sea level rise, it's happening. Ultimately, some of the places that we have on the river and some of the places on the ocean are going to be in jeopardy. It may be 5 years down the road, it may be 50 years down the road, but it's ultimately going to happen. And the things that we can do to help our residents in the future are the things that we need to be doing now.
No, and I understand that, but I like I said, the interesting thing, and Jim, you were here, it really caused an uproar in this community.
Well,
and that's why some of the language changes were made to ensure that they would be able to maintain their property or rebuild it at the same density, because that's clearly not what was in the plan, and we had the discussion because it becomes problematic.
Well, it used to be.
This is where you.
I'm sorry.
No,
it used to be in the old. I call it the old days.
Place,
prior to
yeah.
2011, it was direct populations away from areas of coastal high hazard area. Again, you had the language change here, which is coordinating is much different than it was before. So that's long since gone away. And plus, the physical areas have gone away. Plus, what we haven't even gotten to the state for review is the fact that we've got all this language in that talks about coordinating, and you're not going to do damage to existing, rebuilding, et cetera. So we fought those wars before to where these policies, if we will get them to somebody to review, you will see that they're much better than what they had before. We keep beating up. It's kind of like you've been beating somebody for doing something, and now we're moving forward. So we really don't have the direct concentrations because the language has changed now with the coastal high hazard.
I just want people to understand.
The adaptation area is not the same thing at all.
I know, but it says right here that could be used to good effect, a new designation. So I can understand where people are coming from and why they're concerned.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I want to, first of all, correct a statement that a speaker made. There are no eminent domain issues involved here. And I'd also like to make a motion. I move that the comp plan amendments approved tonight and at the previous meeting, which considered the CPAB's proposed amendments, be attached as Exhibit A to Ordinance 1066 and submitted to DEO for approval.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilwoman Gott and a second by Vice Mayor Brimer.
Now, just a question, do you not want to go to your March 20th meeting? You want to go ahead and do based on what we've done tonight? Because you had the alternative that if you want to, and just a process part, you can do whatever you want, but you can defer the public hearing on your March 20th meeting. You meet again as council. All these corrections and things that we've done tonight, that we've changed in terms of the alternates would be present at that meeting, and you could then transmit at that time, or am I hearing you say you'd rather do it tonight?
We have been through this, the comp plan board has been through this, and I just don't know how many more times we need to go through this.
I just clarifying the record,
we know what we agreed to, and I think it's time to move on.
Great.
Where's the lawyer?
Excuse me, out of order. No, we have closed the public comment.
Without the lawyer here?
Close
to public comment. Have a motion on the floor and a second. Any more comment from council?
I just have a question on the actual ordinance itself. Isn't it being transmitted to the?
It would be transmitted to the DEO.
Well, it doesn't say that in the
It
ordinance.
doesn't have to say that.
Okay,
It's
just
public
checking.
hearing, the advertisement talks
Okay.
about it. The ordinance has actually the requirements that we.
Okay, so you're okay with the way the ordinance is written?
So we're going to send this off. And the
Send it
state's
off
going
and
to come
it'll
back
come back
and.
with comments.
With comments. And then at that point, there might even be changes to it because of their comments.
They
So
will
this
have
is,
comments, and I will review them for you and come back and say, we should change this based on this, or we
so this
should
is
leave
just
it.
a step. I just want to clarify that. All we're doing is an initial step. Then it will come back to us for the appropriate corrections that needs to be made, or whatever they
That is
say.
correct.
Well, it initiates a discussion is what it does.
Okay, thank you.
And this,
Please, thank you. Okay, we have the
and this,
motion on
and
the
this
floor.
motion is not dealing with the ordinance at this time.
Okay. Any further discussion? Lenore?
Yes.
Councilman Montanaro?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Bryan?
Yes.
Councilman Dodd?
Yes.
Yes.
Very good.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, is the first reading of this supposed to be on the 20th?
Well,
First reading was tonight.
you had the first
This
reading.
is the first.
We
reading.
haven't voted on this.
We need to, if we're going to use this as the first reading, then
Yes.
we need to vote on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
And just so you know, you don't necessarily have to have the first reading tonight, but the reason you do is so that you don't have to have an extra meeting to have a first reading. I don't want to confuse you. Go
Yeah,
ahead,
okay.
do the
all right,
first
so
reading.
we have a motion to accept ordinance
I have
10.
some corrections on this ordinance before we make a motion, if I may.
Okay.
On the 1, 2, 3, fourth whereas, middle line, Satellite Beach Land Development Code should be land development regulations.
Go ahead.
And the next whereas, in the second line, proposed amendments being reviewed should say were reviewed.
For being as were.
Yes. Next page, second whereas at the top, it gives a section citation, and Florida statutes should be mentioned in there.
Okay.
On section 1, the third line, ordinance upon adoption, strike hereof. Section 2, it references ordinance 716, and I have no idea what that is.
Where is that again?
Section 2 on page 2. Second line, comprehensive plan, ordinance 716. I have no idea what that ordinance is.
Well, that's your original adoption of your comprehensive plan. That's the ordinance that originally adopted your comprehensive plan.
Do we need that in there?
You should have it in there.
Okay. Did you draft this?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
I did part of it, but I did the bad parts. Go ahead.
Okay, and then on the third line, it says, consists of the pages identified as Exhibit A, text amendments to the future land
Right.
use. The name of that document should be the same as the way you're listing it at the bottom as Exhibit A, so that nomenclature needs to be changed. And at the last line of Section 2, you've got a singular is, and it should be plural are. You've got a plural subject.
Where's the last one?
Section 2, last line, where
Are
it
on
says
file.
is on file, it should be are on file.
Okay.
On section 4, it says, ordinances in conflict are, strike, and the same are, and have it read, are hereby repealed. And with that, I'll move approval of ordinance 1066 as amended,
Second.
Have a
on
motion.
first reading.
I have a motion by Councilwoman Gott, second by Vice Mayor Brimer, on adopting ordinance number 1066 with the corrections on first reading. Any further discussion from council? Hearing none, will you poll the council, please?
Yes.
Councilman Montanaro?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Bryan?
Yes.
Councilman Dodd?
Yes?
Mayor Peters?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you to the board. Thank you guys very much for all your hard work. Mr. Lewis, thank you very much for helping us through
My
this.
pleasure.
Is there any further business? Hearing none, meeting's adjourned.
What? Sure.
That's Ben Smith. Ben, I think one time before
Ben?
him, you.
Lorraine.
Did you get, I'll give you those notes for the one to send.